My name is David, and this is the story of how I lost everything I once held dear. It all began back in the summer of 2010, a time when life seemed simple and full of promise. Fresh out of college, I had landed my first real job as a junior analyst at a financial firm. I was eager, ambitious, and ready to take on the world. It was at a mutual friend's barbecue where I first met Emily. She was a graphic designer, recently graduated and just starting out in her career. Unlike the other guests who were mingling and making small talk, Emily sat quietly by herself, sketching in a notebook. There was something about her serene demeanor that drew me in. I approached her, and we started talking. Our conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything from our favorite books to our childhood dreams. It was as if we had known each other forever. There was an instant connection, a spark that neither of us could ignore. We started dating shortly after that barbecue. Our relationship was like a slow-burning fire, warm and steady. We took things slow, savoring every moment. After a year of dating, we moved in together. It felt right, like the natural progression of our love. Emily brought creativity and color into my otherwise structured and logical life. We balanced each other perfectly. In 2015, during a romantic trip to Paris, I proposed to Emily. It was cliché, I know, but it was perfect for us. We got married in a small ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. Our life together felt like a dream. We bought a house in the suburbs, adopted a golden retriever named Max, and settled into a comfortable routine. For the next few years, life was blissful. We both advanced in our careers. Emily's design business flourished, and I climbed the corporate ladder. We took vacations to exotic places, hosted dinner parties, and spent quiet nights at home watching movies. We talked about starting a family, but decided to wait a bit longer to enjoy our time together. Looking back, there were probably signs that things were not as perfect as they seemed, but I ignored them, lost in the comfort and stability of our life. Emily started working late more often. She would be glued to her phone, texting someone and quickly putting it away when I entered the room. She started going out with friends more frequently, often coming home late, smelling of alcohol and an unfamiliar cologne. I brushed off my growing unease, convincing myself that she was just busy with work and expanding her social circle. But the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. Something was off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. One evening, I came home to find Emily frantically texting on her phone. She didn't notice me at first, and I saw the name Mark on her screen before she quickly locked it and smiled at me. My heart sank. Dear viewers, more than 90% watch my content without subscribing. If you still have not subscribed, then I ask you to do so. For me, this is the best motivation to continue. Who was Mark, and why was she hiding their messages from me? I decided to investigate. Over the next few weeks, I kept a closer eye on Emily. She was more secretive than ever, and it was driving me crazy. One night, she said she was going out with her friend Lisa. After she left, I called Lisa, pretending to need Emily for something urgent. Lisa was confused and said she hadn't seen Emily in weeks. That was the confirmation I needed. Emily was lying to me. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness. I decided to follow her the next time she went out. It didn't take long. That Friday, she said she had a late meeting with a client. I followed her to a fancy restaurant, where she met a man, Mark. Seeing them together was like a punch to the gut. They were laughing, touching, and clearly more than just friends. I took pictures, my hands shaking with rage and disbelief. I felt like a fool. All the late nights, the secret texts, the lies, it all made sense now. I confronted Emily the next morning. I showed her the pictures and demanded an explanation. She tried to deny it at first, but the evidence was irrefutable. She broke down, admitting she had been seeing Mark for months. She said she didn't mean for it to happen, that she still loved me, but she couldn't help her feelings for him. I was numb. I didn't know what to do or say. I felt like my world was falling apart. I left the house needing space to think. I spent the day driving aimlessly, trying to process everything. How could she do this to me? To us? The days following the confrontation were a blur. Emily and I tried to talk, but every conversation ended in shouting and tears. She said she was confused, that she didn't know what she wanted. I told her I couldn't live like this, that I needed to know if she was committed to fixing our marriage or if she wanted to be with Mark. Emily decided to move out for a while to figure things out. I was devastated but agreed, hoping that some time apart would help us both see things more clearly. But the separation only made things worse. Emily continued to see Mark, and it became clear that she had already made her choice. I filed for divorce a month later. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but I knew it was the right one. The divorce process was long and painful. We argued over everything: the house, the dog, our belongings. Every meeting with our lawyers felt like a fresh wound being opened. During this time, I discovered more about Emily and Mark's affair. It turned out that Mark was not just any man. He was her business partner. They had started the affair during a business trip. The betrayal cut even deeper, knowing that it wasn't just a random fling, but a relationship built over time, right under my nose. One day, I decided to confront Mark. I needed to understand how this had all happened. We met at a coffee shop. He was surprisingly open about everything, almost smug. He said that he and Emily had fallen in love, and that he believed she would eventually leave me for him. His confidence was infuriating. I wanted to punch him, to make him feel the pain I was going through, but I held back. Emily and I continued to live separately as the divorce proceedings dragged on. I felt lost and alone. I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the pain. My friends and family were supportive, but it was hard to talk about what I was going through. I felt like I had failed, like I wasn't good enough to keep my wife's love. One night, I received a call from Emily. She was crying, saying that she had made a mistake and wanted to come back. She said that her relationship with Mark wasn't what she thought it would be. Dear viewers, I ask you to subscribe to the channel under this video. I will be very grateful to you. Missed me and our life together. Part of me wanted to believe her, to welcome her back with open arms. But another part of me, the rational part, knew that too much had happened. The trust was gone, and without trust, there could be no future for us. I told her that I needed more time to think. I hung up, feeling more conflicted than ever. I decided to seek professional help, to talk to a therapist about everything I was going through. It was a difficult step to take, but it was necessary. I needed to understand my own feelings, to process the betrayal and the loss. Therapy helped me see things more clearly. I realized that while Emily's betrayal was devastating, it didn't define me. I was more than just a man who had been cheated on. I had my own strengths, my own worth. I deserved someone who would love and respect me fully, not someone who would betray me for another man. As the divorce finalized, I started to rebuild my life. I moved out of our house and into a small apartment downtown. It was a fresh start, a chance to rediscover who I was without Emily. I reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies I had neglected, and even started dating again. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Our 10 years together had come to an end. I moved out of our house and into a small apartment downtown. It was a fresh start, but it felt lonely and hollow. Emily tried to reach out a few times, but I couldn't bring myself to talk to her. I needed to move on, to heal. I threw myself into my work, spent time with friends, and picked up old hobbies. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life. Now, a year later, I'm doing better. The pain is still there, but it's not as sharp. I've started dating again, cautiously opening myself up to the possibility of new relationships. I've learned a lot about myself through this process. I've realized my worth, and that I deserve someone who loves and respects me fully. To those reading my story, I ask for your advice. Have any of you been through something similar? How did you cope? How did you move on? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Maybe we can help each other heal. Thank you for listening. The weeks following Emily's departure were a haze of confusion and anger. I buried myself in work, trying to escape the constant churn of thoughts about our failed marriage. The office became my refuge, a place where I could lose myself in spreadsheets and data. But even there, I couldn't escape completely. Colleagues would ask about Emily, about why I seemed so distracted. I told them we were having problems, keeping the details vague. One evening, I came home to find a letter in the mail. It was from Emily. My heart pounded as I opened it, expecting another plea for forgiveness or an explanation. Instead, it was a legal document, a formal request for divorce mediation. It was clear that she was moving forward, and I had no choice but to do the same. During the mediation sessions, Emily was distant and cold. She was no longer the woman I had fallen in love with. She was a stranger, someone who had hurt me in ways I never thought possible. Our discussions were terse and professional, focused on dividing assets and finalizing the separation. Every now and then, she would glance at me with a look that seemed to mix regret and determination. Amidst all this, Mark's presence loomed over everything. I knew they were still seeing each other. It was impossible to ignore. Friends would tell me about seeing them together, looking happy and carefree. It was like a dagger to my heart every time I heard about it. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, unable to wake up. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to confront Emily once more. I needed closure, something to help me understand why she had done this. I called her, asking if we could meet. To my surprise, she agreed. We met at a quiet cafe we used to frequent. The familiar surroundings brought back a flood of memories, but I pushed them aside. Emily arrived looking tired, as if the weight of her decisions was finally catching up with her. "Why, Emily?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do this to us?" She sighed, looking down at her coffee cup. "David, I don't know. I was unhappy. I felt trapped. And then Mark came along and he made me feel alive again." "Alive?" I scoffed. "What about us? What about everything we built together?" "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted this to happen." Her apology felt hollow, like a bandage on a deep wound. We sat in silence for a while, each lost in our thoughts. It was clear that there was no going back. The love we once shared was gone, replaced by bitterness and pain. As the divorce proceedings continued, I started receiving strange messages. They were anonymous, cryptic, and threatening. At first I thought it was just a prank, but then they started getting more personal. The messages hinted at secrets, things only Emily and I knew. I began to suspect that Mark was behind them, trying to intimidate me or push me over the edge. I decided to hire a private investigator to dig into Mark's past. If he was going to play dirty, so would I. The investigator uncovered some interesting information. Mark had a history of deceit and manipulation. He had been involved in several business scandals, always managing to slip away unscathed. It seemed he was a master at hiding his true nature. Armed with this information, I confronted Mark. We met in a parking lot, away from prying eyes. He was smug, confident that he had won. But as I laid out everything I had learned, his demeanor changed. He became defensive, angry. "You think you can scare me, David?" he spat. "You're just a pathetic loser who couldn't keep his wife." "Maybe," I replied calmly, "but at least I'm not a fraud." The confrontation didn't go as I had hoped. Mark was too slippery, too practiced at evasion. But it felt good to stand up to him, to show him that I wasn't afraid. I hoped that maybe it would give him pause, make him think twice about continuing his games. As the final court date approached, I started to feel a sense of closure. The past year had been a nightmare, but I was ready to put it behind me. I had survived the worst, and I was ready to move on. Emily and I had one last meeting before the divorce was finalized. It was at our house, the place we had called home for so many years. We walked through the empty rooms, reminiscing about the good times. It was bittersweet, a reminder of what we had lost. "David," she said softly, "I really am sorry. For everything." "I know," I replied. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Emily. I really do." With that, we said our final goodbyes. The divorce was finalized the next day, and I walked out of the courthouse a free man. It was over. The chapter of my life with Emily had ended, and a new one was beginning. The months following the divorce were a period of intense reflection and self-discovery. I had been through hell and back, but I had survived. Now it was time to rebuild, to find out who I was without Emily. I started by making small changes. I redecorated my apartment, creating a space that felt like mine. I joined a gym, focusing on my physical health as a way to cope with the emotional turmoil. I reconnected with friends and family, leaning on them for support and companionship. I also threw myself into my work. My career had always been important to me, but now it became a lifeline. I worked long hours, taking on new projects and challenges. It was a way to keep my mind occupied, to avoid dwelling on the past. But no matter how busy I kept myself, there were still moments of profound loneliness. Nights when I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what went wrong. I missed the companionship, the feeling of having someone to share my life with. It was a void that no amount of work or socializing could fill. One evening, as I was sorting through old photos, I found a picture of Emily and me from our honeymoon. We looked so happy, so in love. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of acceptance. That chapter of my life was over. It was time to let go and move forward. I decided to take a trip, something I had always wanted to do but had never found the time for. I booked a flight to Japan, a place that had always fascinated me. The culture, the history, the food, it was the perfect escape. The trip was transformative. I immersed myself in the experience, exploring ancient temples, bustling cities, and serene landscapes. I met new people, made friends, and even had a brief romance with a fellow traveler. It was a reminder that life was still full of possibilities, that there was so much more to see and do. When I returned home, I felt rejuvenated. The trip had given me a new perspective, a sense of hope. I was ready to start anew, to embrace the future with open arms. I decided to get back into dating. It was daunting at first, but I knew it was a step I needed to take. I joined a few dating apps, went on a few dates. Some were awkward, others were pleasant. I met interesting people, shared laughs, and even had a few sparks. It wasn't easy, but it was a start. One evening I matched with a woman named Sarah. She was intelligent, kind, and had a great sense of humor. We met for coffee, and the connection was immediate. We talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams. It was refreshing to meet someone who seemed to understand me, who made me feel valued. Sarah and I started seeing each other regularly. It was slow and steady, but it felt right. She knew about my past, about Emily, and she was patient and understanding. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about love. As my relationship with Sarah blossomed, I continued to work on myself. I attended therapy sessions, focusing on healing and personal growth. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made, to let go of the anger and resentment. I also took up new hobbies. I started painting, something I had always wanted to try but had never had the time for. It became a therapeutic outlet, a way to express my emotions and creativity. I joined a local art group, made new friends, and even showcased my work at a small gallery. Life was finally starting to feel normal again. I had found a new rhythm, a new purpose. I was happy, or at least on the path to happiness. One day, out of the blue, I received a message from Emily. She wanted to meet, to catch up. I was hesitant, unsure if I was ready to face her again, but curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed. We met at the same cafe where we had our last conversation before the divorce. Emily looked different, older, more subdued. We talked about our lives, about the changes we had gone through. She told me about her struggles, about how things with Mark hadn't worked out. She seemed regretful, almost nostalgic. As we talked, I realized that I'd moved on. The pain and anger I once felt were gone, replaced by a sense of closure. Emily was a part of my past, but she no longer had power over my present or future. "I'm glad you're doing well, David," she said as we parted ways. "You deserve to be happy." "Thank you, Emily," I replied. "I wish you the same." Walking away from that cafe, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had finally closed that chapter of my life. I was free. Now, as I sit here writing my story, I feel a sense of peace. It has been a long and difficult journey, but I have come out stronger and wiser. I have learned to value myself, to embrace the possibilities that life offers. I ask for your advice. Have any of you been through something similar? How did you cope? How did you move on? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Maybe we can help each other heal. Thank you for listening.